Here's where it all comes together. Hey there, hello everybody, welcome back to Fiction Technician. If you haven't been here before, my name is Jane Kalmus. I am a writer of historical cozy mysteries, and today I am wrapping up my series on how to design and begin writing your cozy mystery series. So we've talked about a lot of fun things in this series. We talked about how to choose your hook, how to generate plots that go with it. We talked about how to design your sleuth and design the perfect love interest for them. And we talked about how to design all those little friends and associates who are going to help them dig into this case. So if that sounds like content you want to see and you missed it, don't worry, because I'm going to link it right up here and you can check that out right from the beginning. But today I'm super pumped because I'm going to be sharing with you my cozy mystery outline. Okay, this is the template outline that I would use to write a cozy mystery. Actually, I would use this outline to write any book. And if you've been a writer for a long time, some of the structural elements may be a little familiar to you, but we're going to be talking specifically about how they apply to cozies. There are 5 acts in my template, and we're going to talk about what needs to happen in each of these acts in order to create a solid cozy that's going to conform to the expectations of the genre and leave your readers with a satisfying experience. Okay, so the 5 acts of my template are Act 1, the challenge accepted. Here's where we learn about our sleuth, get introduced to a few characters, and the plot gets kicked off, and our sleuth must decide to commit to cracking this case. Act 2 is, it's all fun and games until, and well, here's where we have fun. We begin digging into the investigation and learning more about the characters that surround the sleuth. Act 3 is called Things Fall Apart. And here's where things get hairy for your sleuth. The stakes and momentum of your plot are going to escalate, and your sleuth is going to suffer some crushing defeats. But that's okay, because they're going to rally in Act 4. Go the hard road. Okay, Act 4 is where your sleuth has to double down and recommit to giving everything she's got to solving this case. She'll confront the killer, and everything will be nicely resolved. But we still need Act 5, the denouement, where we tie up loose ends and kind of discover how our sleuth has gained by this experience. So we're going to go through all of these acts specifically for how they work with a cozy. But before we get started, if you like my work, if you feel that I'm doing a good job, please like this video and hit that big red subscribe button and click the bell icon right next to it to get notifications every time I upload. But if you really want to help me out, the best thing you can do is share this video on social media or with another writer who you think would enjoy it. All right, let's talk about Act 1, the challenge accepted. This first act is going to take up about the first quarter of your book, but in that time, it's got a lot of jobs that it needs to do. So I'm going to change up this graphic here. We're going to look at just the part of your book that is the challenge accepted, and we're going to go through kind of all the jobs it needs to do in order and when they need to happen. If you're wondering how long each act should be, for me, an 80,000 word book, which is about right for a cozy, an 80,000 word book needs about 45 scenes. Your scenes may be longer or shorter than mine, but that's about how many I need. So that gives me about 11 scenes for each of the first 4 acts and 1 to wrap things up in the denouement. But this is a rule of thumb. This is not something I stick to exactly. But just to give you an idea of how many scenes roughly each act is going to have. Okay, the first thing this act is going to do before we even start the mystery is it's going to introduce our sleuth and his or her chronic issue. When I'm planning a book, I like to think of it as having an acute issue, a problem that's happening right now and needs to be solved, and a chronic issue, a problem of long standing. One example I use often is The Christmas Carol. In The Christmas Carol, Scrooge's chronic issue is his greed. He's not really aware so much that this is a problem, but it is. It is keeping him from living his best life and recognizing the value of his fellow man. And when he has to grapple with the acute issue of enduring the experience of the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, he is going to solve that chronic issue. So in a cozy, the acute issue is usually going to be that murder case, but the chronic issue can be a lot of things. Perhaps your sleuth is trying to regain confidence after a divorce. Maybe she has to grapple with the fact that life circumstances have forced her to move back to her sleepy little hamlet, and she needs to find a place for herself here. Maybe it could be as the nosy Nelly who runs the yarn store and digs into murders. Or maybe she has a troubled relationship with a sister or mother. Or perhaps her chronic issue is just going to be that she wants to find love and will find this chronic issue in the love story. But whatever it is, we're going to establish it right up front so that we have kind of a starting place for our sleuth. This is the place that she's going to grow from. The next thing we need for Act 1 is the catalyst. This is otherwise known as the inciting incident, but it's whatever kind of kicks the plot off and gets things rolling. So your catalyst can be whatever you want, but there are a few that are quite popular in cozy mystery. So let's go over those. First, your catalyst could be the murder itself. You could have an early murder, perhaps even in the first few pages of the book, that is really going to get things rolling. But a lot of cozy writers really like to introduce you to the suspects and the victim before the victim dies. And in that case, we're going to need a different catalyst. One very popular thing to do is for the catalyst to be a gathering, a weekend party, a convention, something that brings all of these characters with all this bad blood between them together and provides the situation in which the murder will occur. And another very popular cozy catalyst is a minor crime. Maybe your sleuth learns that one of her friends has been sent a threatening letter, or maybe she's learned that her identity has been stolen. And this minor crime will eventually wind up wrapped into the whole murder storyline. Maybe the person who sent that threatening letter winds up murdered, or maybe the person who is stealing her identity is trying to hide their true identity because they committed a crime long ago that we will eventually need to dig into. The third thing we need to do in Act 1 is character intros. Everybody gets an introduction. We want to meet that victim and have some feelings about her, whether we think she's really nice and we hate that she's about to get killed, or maybe we just hate her and we know that she deserves to be murdered. And we also need intros for all of the suspects. The only exception here is if the investigating officer on this case is going to be an important character, you can hold his character intro until whenever the murder drops. But it's always nice if he's particularly important, perhaps if he's the love interest, if you can get him introduced in this first section and let us start having some feelings about him. And the very last scene of the Challenge Accepted act is a beat I like to call the Challenge Accepted. And it's where your sleuth commits to solving this case. The Challenge Accepted is a moment that really needs to happen in any story. It's not just for cozies, but it's one of those moments a story has to have in order to feel emotionally complete. So let's take a moment to just define what it is. The Challenge Accepted is a scene in which the character makes an emotional commitment to pursuing this particular challenge. In the case of a cozy, it's an emotional commitment to solving this case. In cozies, the investigation may begin well before the Challenge Accepted moment actually happens. You know, perhaps you have a murder that happens in the first chapter. The sleuth is on the scene and she wanders over and begins noticing things about the placement of the body. Well, at this point, she hasn't accepted the challenge. She's merely curious. She won't have her challenge accepted moment until she learns that her friend has been accused of the crime and the friend begs her for help, and she decides that even though pursuing this challenge will be very difficult, she needs to do it for her friend. Another thing that may happen is that your sleuth may actually be officially on the case before she has her challenge accepted moment. If your sleuth is semi-professionally connected to law enforcement, then this is a thing that very well might happen. In my Kitty Callahan series, my heroine is the secretary of a hard-boiled detective in 1920s Chicago. And so in book 2, which I'm currently working on, chapter 1, a woman walks in, says that her husband is missing, and Kitty and her boss take the case. So now she's on the case, but she hasn't really had her challenge accepted moment, and she won't until she goes to this woman's house, meets her children, and sees what's at stake for this family if she doesn't continue on with this case and really commit to solving it. So that's the challenge accepted, a moment where your sleuth can see the difficulty ahead, but emotionally she just has to jump in. So I want to clarify one thing. Just because the sleuth has had her challenge accepted moment, it does not necessarily mean that a murder has happened yet. It could be that the challenge she has accepted is how to get her cousin out of a inopportune marriage, or how to deal with these threatening letters that her friend is receiving. Eventually, she will have to deal with a dead body as part of that challenge, but you may choose to hold the first murder as late as perhaps the end of the second act. So let's deal with that second act right now. It's called It's All Fun and Games Until. And if you are a fan of the Save the Cat series by the screenwriter Blake Snyder, then you may realize that I stole the name for this act from one of his beats, Fun and Games. And that's just because there's no better way to describe what's going to happen in this quarter of the book. Okay, we are going to be developing theories, looking for clues, interviewing suspects, and trying to understand more about the relationships of the group of people surrounding this crime. This is the case even if we haven't had our first murder yet. We're still going to be trying to understand this group of suspects and what makes them tick. If you have a love interest, you definitely want him to be introduced by this point, because part of the fun and games can be some spicy antics with the love interest. And fun and games will end with a point that I like to call a place of change. People often call this the midpoint, and that's because it happens in the middle. It's basically right in the middle of your book. And I like to call it a place of change because that's what I like to happen here. I like to shake things up, surprise the reader, and keep the story from feeling too linear. Let's talk about options for what can happen during your place of change beat at the middle of your book. You might choose to have your first murder happen here. If you wanted a nice, slow setup where we understand the tensions between the characters before somebody dies, this is a great place to drop that body. If, however, you had the murder earlier, you may still choose to kill somebody at the midpoint. A lot of writers do this because, frankly, there is no better shortcut to drama than a dead body. My favorite thing to do during a place of change is to shake up my sleuth's perspective. I like to bust up her theories, make her think that she's been going at everything all wrong, and she's got to look at the case again from a whole new angle. So you can actually do this at the same time as you murder a new character. That's very easy, because if that new victim is somebody who's unconnected to the original victim, or maybe there's somebody to whom our original suspected motive seems unlikely to apply, or maybe they're our principal suspect themselves, well, then that is both going to give us that nice juicy drama of a dead body, but it's also going to completely shake up our sleuth theories. Another very good thing to have happen at this beat is for your sleuth to get into danger. If the killer thinks that the sleuth is onto them and that they may be caught, well, then they may try attacking the sleuth and turning the sleuth into another victim. We're halfway through the book and we're entering an arc I call Things Fall Apart. So obviously this is where things get hairy for your sleuth. She is suffering defeat after defeat, not just in the main plot where she's investigating, but likely also in her love story and in any subplots as well. You can also think of this arc as the point in the book where the killer kicks things into high gear. Okay, there's still a murderer out there and he doesn't want to get caught. And if he's a proactive sort, he will probably spend this part of the book doing anything he can to prevent the sleuth from discovering his identity. He might plant false clues or destroy real ones. He might try to distract her by engineering some of those defeats that she's suffering in the subplots. And he might even attack her physically. So we're just going to kind of keep dumping troubles on our sleuth until we reach the 3/4 point in our book. That's the end of the arc, and it's a beat called All Is Lost. All right, this is another beat name that I have stolen from the Blake Snyder beat sheet. And basically it is where your sleuth suffers her biggest defeat. whatever. Maybe a huge piece of evidence has been destroyed. Maybe somebody who she hoped to protect has been killed or kidnapped. But whatever has happened, she is devastated. She is at her lowest point ever. My favorite act is going to take up the last quarter of the book, and it's called Go the Hard Road. Okay, so what do I mean by go the hard road? Well, the fact is, your sleuth's been trying to take it easy. Whenever we do anything in life, be it registering our kids for dance class or solving a murder, we try to do it in the easiest way, the way that's going to cost us the least. The least money, the least time, the least pain. And I hate to break it to you, but that's what your sleuth's been doing all along. She thought she was fully committed to solving this murder, but she's been holding back. Maybe she's been unwilling to ask for help from her ex-boyfriend, who also happens to be her current love interest. Or maybe there's a location she's been unwilling to investigate because it holds painful memories. But whatever it is, she's been holding a little bit back, and now's the time. Now's the time to give that up, double down, and that is going to be what's required to rocket her on the path toward actually solving this murder. Figuring out what your sleuth is holding back on is a great way kind of to put the final flourishes on her character. And it's also a wonderful way to create a scene in which your readers can really feel how much solving this crime has come to mean to her. Once she takes that final step, she's going to be putting the last clues together, and that's going to lead her to the confrontation. The confrontation with the killer is a scene that your readers have been looking forward to this whole time. So you want to make it great, and you've got a lot of different directions you can go. You might choose to do a traditional drawing room scene where the sleuth gathers all the suspects and unmasks the killer in front of everyone. Or you might choose to do a more intimate scene with just the killer and the sleuth. You can go with a verbal confrontation in which the killer is accused and forced to confess. Or you might go with a physical confrontation in which the sleuth's life is actually put in jeopardy. Either way, by the end of this scene, the killer is going to be fairly caught and their fate will be sealed, either because their guilt will have been exposed to the world or perhaps because they will have died during this confrontation, although that is less likely in a cozy than in other grittier mysteries. The last act is the denouement. So this is going to be a very brief act. It might be just 1 or 2 scenes, but like the first act, it's got a lot of heavy lifting to do. Okay, there are several things that we need to do in the denouement in order to make our cozy feel nicely tied up. The first thing we want to do is explain clues. Any clues that your sleuth picked up but was unable to make clear to the reader, here's the time when we make them clear. This is the moment when your sleuth's best friend says, "But how did you know that the butler was actually Lady Eleanor's estranged son?" And your sleuth says, "Well, their unusual aquamarine eyes were a dead giveaway." This is also a moment when we can add any emotional context to the mystery that we need. You know, maybe while the sleuth was investigating, she learned that the butler was Eleanor's son, but we didn't really have the opportunity to hear Lady Eleanor speak to the pain of giving this child away. Now is the time that she can do that, and we can come to understand the emotional storyline that led to our murder. And this is also the time when we can tie up any little storylines. Maybe we really want to know what happened to Lady Eleanor's shy younger daughter, and we learn in this scene that she has decided to throw over her stuffy fiancé because he jumped behind her during the big deadly confrontation scene. And the very last and most important thing that we do in the denouement is we take a moment to revel in the sleuth's changed status. Okay, you remember that chronic issue that we introduced back in the very first beat of this story? Well, now is a moment that we get to see how far the sleuth has come. Maybe she gained that confidence she was lacking. Maybe she had to repair that damaged relationship with her sister in order to go the hard road and solve the case. But whatever her issue was, she has come a long way, and now is our moment to appreciate that with her. Check out